Hi, this is Kim Polishuk
and Jen Giffen,
hosts of Shooks and Giff, the podcast, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network.
Just like the show you're listening to right now.
The opinions expressed are those of each individual host.
Be sure to check out all of our other great podcasts by visiting edupodcastnetwork.com.
And get ready, because the learning begins in 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to episode 36 of the Burned In Teacher Podcast and episode 1 of the Summer Self-Care series, 3 ways to tackle your teacher burnout this summer. Let's get started. Welcome to the Burned In Teacher Podcast. I'm Amber Harper, and the educators on this podcast are brave enough to share their stories of burnout with the world. On BIT, we get real, we get honest, and we take action. Action against the burnout with stories from burned out teachers, advice from experts, and actionable steps you can take today to beat the burnout and become a happier, more fulfilled human being. Let's get started. Hey there, Burned In Teachers. Welcome to episode 36 of the Burned In Teacher Podcast. And as you heard in the pre-roll, episode 1 of the Summer Self-Care series. This, of course, will continue to be all summer, 1 part burnout and all other parts action, inspiration, and support for teachers dealing with burnout. This show is really all about equipping you with practical tactics to help you along your journey out of burnout with stories, experiences, strategies, and encouragement to take control, become your own hero, and beat that burnout. So we really need all of these things to figure out how we can go from burned out teacher to burned in human. You deserve to feel excited and empowered in your career in education. And that's what this podcast and Burned In Teacher is all about. Yes, we need the support and community, which you can find here and in the Burned In Teacher Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/burnedinteacher. But you also need the strategies and encouragement that stories and experiences can bring to light, the ways that you can actually take control over your career in education and of your everyday life. So if we've not met before, I'm Amber Harper, and I'm the creator of Burned In Teacher, which was born out of my teacher burnout and my burn in while I was a full-time teacher for 12 years. And of course, I am your host of this podcast. And whether this is your first time or your 36th time listening to this podcast, I am deeply, deeply grateful. There are a zillion podcasts out there for you to choose from. And the fact that you're tuning in to spend a little part of your day with me means more than I can say. And I'm so grateful to you. And I promise I won't let you down with today's podcast. Okay, so we're going to get started with the 3 ways that you can tackle teacher burnout this summer. But first, I have to give a listener shout out. And this is a shout out from Corey Lee Knight. He left a very kind review on iTunes saying, "Awesome content for any teacher. Amber has a unique perspective on bringing teachers together to stay motivated and passionate in their craft of teaching. Great interviewer and podcaster." Corey, thank you so much. And Corey was actually a guest on the Burned In Teacher podcast back in January. It was episode 18, and it's a good one. If you are wondering how to use that educational technology in your classroom because it's really burning you out, that's a really great episode for you to listen to. Now, look, it's a little bit awkward to sing my own praises on the podcast, but I like to do these shout outs because, first of all, thank you so much for writing them. Thank you for taking time to do so. And also, I just really appreciate you finding the value in what I do. And I just want you to know that it truly lights me up. And if you'd be willing to leave a review and a rating on iTunes, it would mean the world to me. And if you do, I'd also be excited to give you a shout out in the future episode and show you some love. So speaking of episodes, last month we focused solely on classroom management and poor student behavior. And I've gotten a lot of excellent feedback from those episodes, but I'd love to know what you think. So send me an email at support@burnedinteacher.com or share your progress or happenings on Facebook or Instagram by taking a screenshot of your favorite episode or the episode that made the biggest impact on you, and tag me at Burned In Teacher and share what action steps you're taking to take control of your teacher burnout, because you know I'm all about taking action. So I'm so excited to welcome you to another brand new episode of the Burned In Teacher podcast. And this one is going to activate some change in your life. So here's your warning. If you do not want to take action against your teacher burnout, then this is definitely not the episode for you, my friends, because today we're going to kick off our summer self-care series by talking about the 3 things that you can do today and this summer, the rest of this summer, to tackle that teacher burnout so you never have to live another school year like the one you're just ending or that you've already ended this school year. You know what I'm talking about, listeners, don't you? I already hear you and I see you shaking your heads. Yes, the year of tears and of stress over your students' behavior and your administrator's demands. The feeling of overwhelm and frustration with the multitude of tasks and changes that have happened and have taken place over the year. The feeling that no matter how hard you work, the results are going to be disappointing. And of course, the feeling of drowning in a sea of negativity and apathy from your coworkers, from your students, from their parents, from social media, from the news that's surrounding us every single day. I hear you. I've been there. I have lived that life. And I can tell you from my experiences as a teacher that I could not wait for the end of the school year to come by the time it was there because I needed some solace from all of the things that were happening to me and around me. And it's now my mission in life to help you to not feel that way. Of course, there's nothing wrong with wanting to wake up whenever you want and have an open day to do all of the things that you didn't feel you could get done during the school year. But what I want to save you is that feeling of survival. And that's exactly what the Burned In Teacher podcast and burnedinteacher.com's mission is to keep you from surviving and help you to thrive in your career and education. So at the time of this recording, we're in the month of June. And here in America, we are in a time of seasonal change. And even more specifically, here in the Midwest, we are transitioning from what I feel was a long winter and spring. And I know all of you here in the Midwest, you are shouting an amen. And that means that you've either already ended your 2019-2020 school year or are drawing close to the end. And this means classroom packing, possibly moves being made, last minute meetings, and then off you are to your summer. Say it with me. Woohoo! You're leaving a trail of burnout smoke behind you as you hightail it out the door and you leave it all behind. But wait, I hate to be the bearer of bad news that you know is coming, but here in the States, we just had Memorial Day weekend last week. And for a lot of us, Memorial Day weekend is the official start of summer. There are cookouts and pools are opening, families are getting together. But my friends, before you know it, the first teacher day and student day is coming quick. You know it's true. And I'll bet you're telling yourself the same lie you did last summer and the one before that and the one before that. I won't think about it for a few weeks and I'll take a break and things will be better next year. Have you told yourself that lie before? And you know it's a lie because you go back to school and it starts out great. And then after about week 2 or 3, you're back in survival mode again for the next 9 months. My friend, you're very right. You do deserve a break. You deserve not to think about school for a few weeks and months even, but you equally deserve to think about yourself and your well-being after school starts and what you can do right now this summer to prepare for a life of being burned in when school starts again in the fall. As I mentioned earlier, this series is going to light your pants on fire, Burned In Teachers, because after today's episode, we've got some guests coming on that are going to kick your journey out of burnout into high gear. So stay tuned at the end of the episode and I'll enlighten you about who's coming on and when you can expect to see new episodes of the Burned In Teacher podcast and this series for the rest of the summer self-care series. So let's dive into the meat of today's episode, which is 3 ways you can tackle your teacher burnout this summer. So you want to spend your summer relaxing. You want to spend your summer maybe either reflecting or maybe not reflecting on the past school year. You want to spend time with your loved ones. You want to enjoy that time off. So you may or may not have noticed that, like I said earlier, Memorial Day weekend was last week, and I did not release a new episode. Typically, new episodes come out every Monday morning, and last Monday, I didn't put anything out. And it wasn't just because it was Memorial Day weekend. It was because I've been working on some really big projects in backstage of Burned In Teacher. And I'm going to share one of them today. And that's where our 3 steps are going to come from. And it's called the Teacher Burnout Cheat Sheet. And if you've not already heard of the Teacher Burnout Cheat Sheet, it may be because A, you're not part of the Burned In Teacher email community, or you're not a member of the Burned In Teacher Facebook group. Those are the 2 places where I have talked about this Teacher Burnout Cheat Sheet and the Teacher Burnout quiz. So as we go through these 3 steps today, you're going to hear me reference these 2 things, and you can actually get access to the Teacher Burnout Cheat Sheet by going to bit.ly/BIT quiz. So first of all, taking the quiz. And that's actually the first step to tackling your burnout. You've got to be able to place a name on your specific type of burnout. And this is the way to do it. So when you go to bit.ly/BIT quiz, or you can actually go to burnedinteacher.com and there's a banner across the top of the homepage. Or if you go to burnedinteacher.com/burnout quiz, I have lots of different ways that you can get to this quiz. It's so important. It's just a quick 6-question quiz. It takes less than 5 minutes to take, and right away, like a snap, it will give you your results, and it's going to tell you one of 3 different types of burnout. All right. It's either going to classify you as a burned and over it teacher, a burned and unbalanced teacher, or a burned and bored teacher. Now, when you get your teacher burnout cheat sheet, it will go into more detail about the types of burnout and what each of them means. But I'll tell you a little bit about each of these right now. So the burned and over it teacher is someone who may find themselves saying things like, no matter how hard I work, I'll be disappointed with the results. You used to love teaching, going to school, interacting with students, their parents, and your administrator, but now things seem to be so different. You've been overtaken with that apathy, the overwhelm, the frustration that come from years of working really hard with little return on your time and thought investment. So this really has to do with that feeling of apathy and negativity and just being surrounded by it, and therefore becoming part of that negativity. The next type of teacher burnout you may find yourself classified as is burned and unbalanced. This is where you're saying things like, I used to love being so involved in leading clubs and teams and other communities in my school. I used to really have a good handle over my time and when I would get to school and when I would leave. And when you started teaching, you were happy to do the extra work, but now you've either, things have changed in your life, either personally or professionally, but you've grown out of love with these extra responsibilities and all of this workload that continues to pile on. So you're really starting to begin to resent your students and other teachers for coming into your room during your prep time because you are trying to get ready for the next period or for the next lesson. And you just consistently feel unprepared and overwhelmed by all that there is to do. And the third type of burnout that you may find yourself experiencing is burned and bored. This is where you're probably saying, I still love education and teaching, but I'm just so bored with what I'm doing right now. My students deserve someone who is passionate about this grade or this subject. I've got to find something that ignites me again. So you probably still have great relationships with your administration and your coworkers and your kids, and you've got great processes and routines in your life that are keeping everything balanced, but you just don't feel challenged enough. You don't feel like this is what you're supposed to be doing anymore. So you're just feeling a little bit bored by the monotony of the day in and day out activities that teaching can bring. So that's step 1, taking the teacher burnout quiz, identifying your type of burnout. All right. Now, the next step is something that is brand new. The teacher burnout quiz has actually been around since about the end of January-ish. But step 2 is pretty new. This just came about in the last month, and this is one of those things I was working on during that week of Memorial Day weekend. And that is identifying the stage of teacher burnout that you are in. So now you know how to name your burnout, but we've got to figure out just how burned out you are. So in the teacher burnout cheat sheet, you've got a great graphic visual of what you're saying, what you're feeling, and what you're doing, what you're thinking about in these different stages. So I'll give you the names of these stages. There are 6. It goes from 0 to 5. So if you are at a stage 0, you're feeling isolated. You are feeling totally burned out, isolated, ashamed, stressed. You are having trouble sleeping. You haven't really done anything to make any changes. This may be your first step to tackling your burnout. You may be thinking about quitting even. The next stage is called build your spark. So this is where we really need to work on building your spark for your career and life again. So you still may be feeling a little guilty, resentful, cynical, maybe of this whole burned in teacher thing, maybe a little paralyzed. You don't even know where to start. You are doing a lot of negative talk. You're doing a lot of self-talk here that is not helpful. You're tearing yourself down and maybe even blaming others for your burnout. And you might be thinking about how much you dread your days and weeks. And even though it's the beginning of summer and the end of a school year, you're already dreading next school year because you know how terrible you feel now at the end of this one. Stage 2 is where we will build your ignition. So this is where you are feeling validated. You are actually feeling like, okay, what I'm feeling is okay, and I know how to name it, and now I'm going to be more curious about it and reflective. You may, although, feel a little bit anxious because now that you're able to identify it, you're feeling like, okay, I don't know what to do, or where should I go? Who should I talk to? But actually what you're doing is you're starting to open these conversations. And if you're in the Burned In Teacher Facebook and talking and asking for help, this is what you're doing. You're seeking solutions. You're finding mentors. You're really thinking about what's truly challenging you and possible solutions for this burnout. So that's stage 2. Stage 3 of your burnout could be where you need to build your flame. All right, you are now starting to feel activated and more insightful to your own feelings about your career and life. You may be actively making changes, taking some risks, trying some new things. You may be thinking about what you truly want for yourself, because here's the thing about Burned In Teacher. Burned In Teacher's mission is not to make you stay in the classroom if you do not truly want to be there. It's also not here. I am not here to tell you to get out of education if that is not what you truly want. Burned In Teacher is here to help you to take your next best steps in or out of education, because you deserve to live a happy and fulfilled life, but your students also deserve to have a happy and fulfilled teacher in the classroom with them. So if that is or is not you, that's your decision. And what you're doing right now with listening to this podcast, and hopefully your next step is to actually take these actions that I'm presenting to you. Your main initiative right now is to be able to identify your type, identify your stage, so you can take your actions. All right, so let's finish these stages and then we'll talk about specific actions you can take for your type of burnout. So let's move on to stage 4, and that is build your fire. So we've gone from burned out to build your spark, build your ignition, build your flame. Now we're building an actual fire. Now you're feeling more intentional, more engaged, inspired. You are taking action and you are feeling the momentum just carrying you as you continue to do more things like making plans, working with others to create change in your life or in the life of others, and you're seeking new ways of being. You're also thinking about what you can do to prevent this from happening again, because now you have tools and strategies under your belt that you can whip out anytime that you feel that burnout starting to creep in. Now, our ultimate goal, of course, is to become a stage 5, burned in. This is your feeling of empowerment. You're feeling supported, organized, more balanced. You have daily assurance and flexibility. You're sleeping better. You're showing gratitude for things that are happening in your daily life. And you're thinking about your goals, your passions, your strengths, and you're really valuing your story and this journey that you have had. So here's something I didn't tell you about the cheat sheet. So one thing that you need to know is that it also doubles as a journal of sorts because you're able to actually print it out and write on it. But if you don't want to take the time to print it, if you are fine with reading things digitally, I actually turned this into a fillable PDF. So you can type out your stage, your burnout type, why you're feeling the way you're feeling, and all of the things that you need to write out to help you to take your next best steps. Okay, so we've taken the quiz, identified your teacher burnout type, and now you know what stage you're in. Now it's time to take some specific actions, and I've got those in there too. So you get to choose which action steps you want to take for your type of burnout. So I'll give you an example of some for each of these different types of burnout, okay? So if you're a burned and over it teacher, you're going to definitely want to focus on relationship building because as cliche as it sounds, it's all about the relationships here. So you've got to have some conversations, maybe some tough ones. You've got to ask some tough questions, and you should be taking note of their answers and really taking time to process them and really thinking about what you can change and not focusing on what others should change. Because if there's one thing that's true in all of this, we cannot ever change other people's actions. We cannot truly manage other people. All we can manage are ourselves. So acting, seeking help, planning ahead, that is what's really going to be helpful for you to move into your next school year. Okay, so burned and unbalanced actions. You need to be writing out all of the things that you do on a typical day in your classroom in one list. And then a typical week. What are you expected to do in 1 week? What about 1 month? And then you need to take a really close, hard look at what really, truly has to be done. Because sometimes all of these expectations that are weighing us down and costing us so much time, some of that could be due to our need to be in that perfection mode, to get that affirmation from others, those gold stars from other people. And we didn't know it, but what we thought was being asked of us is actually what we are asking of ourselves. So it's really time to truly assess the things that need to be done and the things that are left on this list after you may do some crossing out and maybe some simplifying. So you're going to place your to-dos under the headings of things like grading or entering grades. We all know we need to be entering grades. So what are things that you do that actually support you getting this grading done? Planning and prepping. We all know we need to plan and prep. So maybe you need to be looking ahead and thinking about your units of study or your lessons or, what it is that you have in your curriculum map. Go ahead and start planning some actual activities that will help you get the grades that you need. Think about meetings, your duties, your lunch and downtime, your data entry. Anything that doesn't fit under those typical headings should be kicked out or simplified. All right. So that is a really quick way of me going through burned and unbalanced. There are definitely some other steps in here that you can take. And finally, burned and bored action steps. You're going to focus on analysis. So you need to be a problem solver. You've got to pay attention to the problems in your school and your local community. And how can you and your students become change agents and serve the needs of those in your local community? Maybe you could up your game a little bit. How could you improve your own practice? Just because you're bored doesn't mean that you can't improve. You can bring yourself, your passions, your interests to work with you. You can really reflect on how you've been doing things and how you can maybe make them better. You could also take some risks, maybe try something new, maybe talk to a teacher down the hall that's doing something that you've always wondered a little bit about. Maybe consider a side hustle. All right. A side hustle is something you do on the side to bring in a little bit of extra money, or maybe it's just something you do as a hobby. Maybe you need to bring that into your life more often to build that flame and that fire for education again. Teachers, when it comes to achieving true freedom from teacher burnout, there's nothing that compares to being able to name your type, what stage you're in, and knowing what actions to take. Believing that you can't take control of your teacher burnout is a lie. You can do this, but you don't have to do it alone. Burned In Teacher is here to help you along your journey. If you truly want to leave your burnout behind and move forward in your career and education, you're going to have to choose to be the hero in your own story. So those are the 3 steps. Number 1, take the teacher burnout quiz and identify your burnout type. That's burned and bored, burned and over it, or burned and unbalanced. Step 2 is identifying the stage of burnout that you're in. So that could be stage 0, burned out. Stage 1, build your spark. Stage 2, build your ignition. Stage 3, build your flame. Stage 4, build your fire. And of course, our ultimate goal to get to stage 5, which is burned in. And then step 3 is the most important step, because this is where you're actually taking action. Now, your first step in beating your burnout was number 1, either listening to this podcast or finding me on social media or joining the Burned In Teacher Facebook group. But the action, the things you do on the daily, the things that you choose to do in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead are what are truly going to have the biggest impact on whether or not you actually tackle and take control over your teacher burnout. So although that concludes the 3 steps you can take to tackle your teacher burnout this summer, don't hit the end button just now. Don't hit stop. Don't shut it off. Just give me a couple of more minutes, because I want to tell you what's coming up in the Summer Self-Care series. I've got several guests coming on that are going to really, like I said, light your pants on fire and help you to really take control and allow yourself the care that you deserve to go into next year ready to be a Burned In teacher. So one of the guests is actually a teacher from the Burned In Teacher Facebook group, and she's going to tell her story of how she went from totally burned out to really valuing herself and her self-care, and how she really wishes that she would have had these tips and strategies that she's found in the Burned In Teacher Facebook group and the podcast years ago when she was really struggling, especially when her kids were younger. And she and I have already talked a little bit, and I cannot wait for you to hear her story. It's really inspirational. Now, this is a little crazy, and I couldn't believe this happened, but I actually had a chance to interview my high school principal from when I was a high schooler. And Nate Lau is going to come on the podcast this summer and talk about an organization that he's working with right now called Run Hard, Rest Well, and the 6 ways that you can truly rest this summer and even into next school year. I also have Dana Thomas coming on the podcast from Happy Teacher Revolution, and she's got some excellent tips and strategies for becoming a happier teacher. Another interview you're really going to want to look out for is my conversation with Stephanie DeLussy. She is on Instagram. That's where I found her, and she is a mental health advocate and has been a teacher in the special education sector for several years. And she actually is very honest about her struggle with severe anxiety. And if you follow Stephanie on Instagram at Mrs. D's Corner, you know that she is very honest and open about her struggle with burnout associated with anxiety. And our conversation goes really deep into an honest look at our struggles with anxiety and how it affects our profession as educators. So I hope you are as excited as I am about the lineup of guests that we have coming on the podcast this summer in our Summer Self-Care series. And the last thing that I want to tell you is, if you really, truly want to tackle your burnout, I have a step 4. You remember how I told you that I've been working on some big projects in the backstage of Burned In Teacher? Well, not only have I been working on the teacher burnout cheat sheet, I also turned the Burned In Teacher small group program into a downloadable fillable ebook. That's right. All 8 steps of the Burned In Teacher process have been put into ebook form. So if you're looking for some transformative, impactful, action-packed reading to do this summer, then it's time for you to go to bit.ly/burnedinbook. bit.ly/burnedinbook. This ebook is not only reading material, but it also serves as a guide and a journal for you to do your reflecting and decide what action steps you want to take to tackle your burnout now. Not next year, not next fall, now. So the book is actually called The Burned In Teacher Training ebook, 8 Steps to Go from Surviving to Thriving in Education. This fillable ebook actually doubles as, like I said, a guide and a journal as you go from burned out to burned in educator. So if you're feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, exhausted, know that you can take control by following these 3 steps that I gave you today, and then going to bit.ly/burnedinbook, putting the book in your cart, and taking it with you into your summer so that you can go from burned out teacher to burned in human. I can't wait to hear what you think of the book. And of course, jump into the Burned In Teacher Facebook group. Tell us all about your transformation this summer and how we can help you. And that's it for today's episode, the first episode in the Summer Self-Care series. But I'll be back here in your inbox or in your playlist every other week this summer for more action, inspiration, and support. Burn on, everybody.